Kwame had always been skeptical of the supernatural, dismissing the stories his elders whispered about haunted places and cursed grounds. But when he heard about the abandoned school at the edge of his village, something about the place piqued his curiosity. The stories were endless. Some said a teacher had disappeared there. Others spoke of a group of students vanishing without a trace. And a few whispered about dark rituals tied to the school's very foundation. People from the village warned him repeatedly, never sleep near the abandoned school. But Kwame wasn't one to believe in ghost stories or curses. To him, it all seemed like exaggerated nonsense, the kind of tales told to frighten children. His friends teased him when he mentioned it, saying that if he was brave enough, he should go and spend the night there to prove them wrong. After all, how bad could it be? So, one evening, Kwame set off toward the school with a camera in hand, ready to capture whatever was left of the old building. As he approached the school, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the overgrown grass and broken fences. The school stood in eerie silence, its windows boarded up, its doors sagging as though the structure was barely holding itself together. But it wasn't just the physical decay that sent a shiver down his spine. It was the palpable sense of abandonment, as though the place was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The villagers' warnings echoed in his mind, but Kwame shook them off. He wasn't afraid of some old building that hadn't been used in over 20 years. He set up a small campfire nearby, pulled out his flashlight, and took a deep breath. "Let's do this," he muttered to himself. As the darkness fully enveloped the area, Kwame noticed the temperature drop significantly. His breath began to fog in the chilly air, and his fingers felt the bite of the cold as he adjusted his gear. Everything felt wrong, but his curiosity pushed him forward. Suddenly, his flashlight flickered and then blinked out. Kwame cursed under his breath as he tried to turn it back on, but when he looked up, something caught his eye. The school's windows, dark and empty only moments before, now seemed to hold a faint, flickering light. It was so brief, so subtle, that he wondered if he had imagined it. But when the light vanished, it left a cold, unsettled feeling in his chest. Something was off about this place. His phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting his thoughts. He pulled it out to see a text from his best friend, David. "Bro, be careful. That place is cursed. The rumors are real." Kwame laughed it off, sending a quick reply. "No worries, just going to check it out. Everything's fine." But even as he typed, he couldn't shake the strange feeling creeping over him. The school felt like it was watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. And he was about to do just that. Kwame wasn't going to let the chilling feeling get to him. He had come this far, and now he was determined to prove there was nothing to fear. He pushed aside his unease and moved closer to the school. The wind picked up as he walked, sending leaves skittering across the ground. But there was no sign of the usual animal life, the chirping of crickets or the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. It was as if the entire area had fallen silent, holding its breath. As Kwame approached the school's broken entrance, his heart began to race. The door creaked ominously as he pushed it open, its hinges groaning under the weight of years of disrepair. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of mildew hung in the air. The darkness was suffocating. Kwame flicked his flashlight on, its weak beam cutting through the gloom as he cautiously stepped into what had once been a hallway filled with the laughter of children. Now it was silent. The walls were lined with old lockers, their doors hanging open, some cracked or dented. The floor was covered in broken glass, shards that had once been windows now scattered around like forgotten memories. As he moved deeper into the school, the temperature dropped even more, and his breath began to come out in visible clouds. He glanced around nervously, his flashlight revealing nothing more than abandoned classrooms, empty desks, and faded posters on the walls. But then, in the distance, he heard something, a soft scratching sound, like something dragging across the floor. It was so quiet at first that he thought it might just be the wind. But then it grew louder, closer, and suddenly a sharp noise echoed through the hallway, a loud thud that made him jump in fright. His heart hammered in his chest as he turned to look around. "Hello?" he called out, his voice trembling more than he cared to admit. There was no answer. The school remained eerily still. The silence was broken only by the sound of his own breath. But then something strange happened. The flashlight flickered again, and in the brief moment of darkness, he thought he saw something move in one of the classrooms ahead of him. His pulse quickened. Was it a person? Was someone else here? Or was it something else? Something he didn't want to think about. But before he could move, a loud bang echoed from behind him, followed by a sudden gust of wind that slammed the door shut. Kwame whipped around, his heart racing, but the door was firmly locked. He was trapped. As he tried to open it, the whispers started. At first they were faint, just a murmur, like voices on the wind. But then they grew louder, clearer. It wasn't the wind, these were words, and they were coming from the walls themselves. "Leave, leave now." The words sent a chill down his spine. His hands shook as he fumbled with the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew colder still, and the whispers began to grow more frantic. "What the hell is going on?" Kwame muttered under his breath, his body stiff with fear. "Leave now, or stay forever." A voice cold and unmistakable echoed in his mind. Something was waiting for him, something he couldn't understand but knew was real. And it was hungry. Kwame stood in the classroom, his flashlight trembling in his hand as he stared at the chalkboard. The strange symbols were like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve, each line twisting in unnatural ways. His eyes flicked back to the symbols and then to the room around him, where the darkness seemed to press against the walls, thick and oppressive. He stepped forward, the floorboards creaking under his feet. The whispers had stopped for a moment, replaced by a heavy silence, but Kwame could feel the weight of something unseen bearing down on him. As he stepped closer to the chalkboard, his breath grew cold, and his skin prickled with the feeling of being watched. The symbols on the chalkboard were still there, etched into the surface in hurried, jagged strokes. At first glance, they seemed like nothing more than scribbles, but something in the back of Kwame's mind told him that they were more than that. Something ancient. He reached out a shaking hand and touched the chalkboard, feeling the rough surface beneath his fingertips. The moment his skin made contact, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, and a wave of nausea washed over him. It was as if the room itself was alive, reacting to his presence. The whispers returned, faint at first but growing louder, swirling around him like a storm. "You shouldn't have come here," they seemed to say, their voices twisting in the air. "You shouldn't have come here, Kwame." Kwame's heart pounded in his chest, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the board. His fingers hovered just above the symbols, and something deep within him urged him to look closer. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, but everything felt out of place. The symbols were familiar in a way that was impossible to explain, like they were something he had seen before but couldn't quite remember. It was like the knowledge was just beyond his reach, teasing him with its elusiveness. He stepped back, feeling a surge of panic rising in his chest. The whispers were growing louder now, no longer soft and distant, but clear, like a chorus of voices speaking directly into his mind. "Leave this place," they commanded. "Leave now, before it's too late." But before he could react, the door to the classroom slammed shut with a deafening bang. Kwame spun around, his flashlight casting wild beams of light across the walls. His heart raced and he immediately tried the door, only to find it locked, the handle stubbornly refusing to turn. The walls seemed to close in around him, the air growing thick with a sense of dread. He had to get out, had to leave this cursed place before it consumed him. But there was something more to the whispers now, something darker, something that made his skin crawl. As he stood there, trapped in the classroom, his flashlight flickered again. And in that brief moment of darkness, he heard something else. A voice, distant but unmistakable, calling out to him, "Kwame." The voice sounded like it was coming from inside his head, and yet it wasn't. He turned in a circle, his eyes scanning the room, but there was no one there. The whispers were now a constant hum in the background, but that voice, so clear, so deliberate, rang in his ears like a bell. "You're too late, Kwame." The voice sent a chill through his spine. His breath caught in his throat as he stared at the door, the cold metal handle glinting in the pale light. The air in the room felt heavier now, the walls almost pressing in on him. The school was alive, he realized. Not in the way that living things were, but in a way that he couldn't explain. It had a presence, a consciousness, and it was aware of him. And it didn't want him to leave. With trembling hands, Kwame pulled out his phone, desperate to find something, anything that would explain what was happening. His fingers shook as he opened the browser, typing the name of the school into the search bar. The screen flickered, the dim light from his flashlight illuminating the words as they appeared on the screen. It was then that Kwame found it, a chilling article, a news story from 20 years ago. The headline read, Teacher disappears, students vanish, school shuts down. Kwame's heart skipped a beat as he clicked on the link, his eyes scanning the article. The story was about the mysterious disappearance of Mrs. Nen, a beloved teacher who had vanished one afternoon during a routine staff meeting. No one had ever found her, and the school had closed shortly after. The article mentioned the unsettling feeling that lingered in the school, how it felt like something had been left behind, something dark that no one could quite put into words. As Kwame read, his eyes caught a detail that sent a shiver down his spine. The article mentioned strange symbols found on the chalkboard in Mrs. Nen's classroom. The same symbols he had just seen. The story described how the teacher had been researching local folklore, particularly stories about an ancient ritual tied to the land the school was built on. But the article didn't explain what the ritual was. It only hinted at something dark, something evil, that had been sealed away long ago. The teacher had been close to uncovering it, the article suggested. Too close. Kwame's mind raced as he pieced together the fragments of information. The school wasn't just haunted, it was a place of ritual, a site of dark magic that had never been fully understood. The symbols on the chalkboard, the whispers, the cold air, they were all connected. And now he realized so was he. He wasn't just a curious visitor. He had been drawn here for a reason, part of something much bigger, something that had been waiting for him all along. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. You shouldn't have come. You can't leave now. You belong here. Kwame looked up, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The walls seemed to be moving, shifting in ways that defied logic. The shadows in the corners of the room stretched out toward him, like long fingers reaching for his soul. He could hear the rustling of the wind, even though the windows were sealed shut. The temperature had dropped so low that he could see his breath in front of him. In the corner of the room, something shifted. Kwame turned his head, his flashlight's beam falling on a figure standing in the doorway. It was tall, impossibly tall, its form shadowy and indistinct. But its eyes, those glowing eyes, were unmistakable. They burned into him, cold and full of malice. Kwame froze, unable to move. The figure didn't speak, but it didn't need to. The presence was enough. He could feel its anger, its hunger, its desire to claim him. The walls seemed to close in around him, and the whispers reached a fever pitch. He had uncovered the truth, and now he was part of it. There was no way out. The school had claimed him, just as it had claimed all those before him. As the figure took a step toward him, Kwame felt the weight of the school pressing down on him, its energy suffocating him. The last thing he heard before everything went black was the voice, cold and final. Stay forever, Kwame. Kwame's heart raced in his chest as his eyes scanned the dark corridors of the abandoned school. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of the air pressing down on him. His flashlight flickered again, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. He was no longer in control of the situation. The school, it seemed, was alive. The walls felt like they were closing in around him, the ground beneath his feet uneven, as if shifting with every step. There was a sound, soft at first, like a scraping noise on the floor, but it grew louder, like something or someone was following him. He spun around, his pulse pounding in his ears, but there was nothing there. The air around him had become thick, heavy, and cold. His breath came out in visible clouds, his body trembling with both fear and the bitter chill. The school had become an entity, a place that could warp reality and trap anyone foolish enough to enter. He turned back down the hallway and spotted the exit he thought he had come through earlier. His heart surged with hope. The door. If he could just reach the door, he could escape. Kwame rushed toward it, his footsteps echoing in the stillness of the school. But as he reached out to grasp the handle, the door slammed shut on its own, as though rejecting him. Panic surged through his chest, and he yanked at the handle with all his strength. It wouldn't budge. The door seemed to be locked from the other side, and no matter how hard he pulled, it stayed stubbornly shut. Desperation clawed at him. He looked around frantically, searching for another way out. The whispers had started again, a soft murmur at first, like the rustling of paper, but it quickly grew louder. They were calling his name now. Faint at first, then more distinct, and every time he heard his name, the temperature seemed to drop even further. Kwame, Kwame, you can't leave. The words seemed to seep into his very soul, each syllable sending a shiver down his spine. He stumbled backward, his mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. The whispers surrounded him, closing in like a wave, and then it happened. From the corner of his eye, he saw it. A shadow, tall and thin, moving slowly across the hallway ahead of him. Kwame froze. It wasn't just any shadow. This one was different, unnatural. It moved as though it were part of the very walls themselves. A silhouette that seemed to stretch and distort with every step it took. And then it turned, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. They weren't human eyes. There was nothing human about it. The figure was tall, unnaturally so, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. It didn't have a face, but Kwame could feel its gaze, like an invisible hand pressing against his chest. The thing was watching him, and for the first time, he felt the true weight of terror. It didn't move quickly, but there was a sense of inevitability about it. The way it moved, so slowly and deliberately, felt like a hunter stalking its prey. Kwame's blood ran cold. He tried to scream, but his voice caught in his throat. His limbs felt frozen, his body no longer obeying his frantic commands. He could barely move. Every muscle in his body screamed to run, but he couldn't. The figure advanced toward him, its long, lanky arms outstretched as if reaching for him. The shadows around him deepened, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent, almost frantic. "You cannot escape. Stay with us." The words were no longer just whispers, but became a cacophony, deafening in their intensity. His legs shook, his feet still stuck to the floor, as if the ground itself had claimed him. Kwame's mind raced for an explanation, anything to explain what was happening. But there was no explanation. This wasn't normal. This wasn't something that could be explained away with logic. His body moved on instinct. He turned and ran, fear pumping through his veins, pushing him faster than he thought possible. His breath came in ragged gasps as he bolted down the hallway, not even sure where he was going anymore, just desperate to escape. The sound of his footsteps echoed in his ears, mixed with the scraping sound that had been following him, now growing louder, closer, like the thing was chasing him. Every door he passed slammed shut behind him, the sound of wood splintering as if the school was trying to trap him within its walls. But there was no stopping now. He couldn't slow down. He had to get out. He had to survive. Just as he rounded a corner, he collided with something, a figure, a dark shape that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. He staggered back, his breath catching in his throat, and in that instant, the figure lunged. Kwame didn't hesitate. His body reacted before his mind could catch up, and he shoved the figure aside with all his strength. The impact sent him crashing into the wall, but he didn't stop. He scrambled to his feet and ran, his legs burning with exhaustion, but the adrenaline kept him going. He had to get to the exit. He had to escape. His hands fumbled for the door handle, and this time it gave way. He burst outside into the cold night air, gasping for breath. The school loomed behind him, dark and silent once more. But the feeling of being watched didn't leave him. The shadows of the school seemed to stretch toward him, as if they were reaching for him, waiting for him to return. Kwame didn't look back. He couldn't. He ran. He ran until he was far enough away from the school that he could no longer hear the whispers, no longer feel the pull of the darkness. But the nightmare wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next few days were a blur of confusion and fear. Kwame barely slept, his nights plagued by vivid nightmares that felt all too real. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the figure, tall, dark, and haunting. Its glowing eyes would follow him through the dark corridors of his dreams, its whispers growing louder, more insistent. "You can't escape. You belong to us now." Each night the dreams grew more vivid, more terrifying. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the feeling that the figure wasn't just in his dreams. It was real. The school hadn't just been a place of death and darkness. It was something else entirely, something that had followed him back. The thing he had encountered wasn't bound by the walls of the school. It had come with him. He could feel its presence, watching him, waiting. It wasn't just the fear that gripped him. It was the overwhelming certainty that the curse was real, and he was now a part of it. Kwame's friends noticed the change in him. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. He was constantly on edge, his eyes darting to every shadow, every corner. But no one believed him. They thought it was just stress from the experience, that he was overreacting. They didn't know what he had seen, what he had felt. They didn't know that the thing from the school was still with him. It was like a weight on his chest, a presence that wouldn't leave him alone. His own mind played tricks on him. At times he would hear footsteps behind him, feel someone or something watching him from the shadows. But when he turned around, no one was there. One night, as he sat alone in his room staring at the ceiling, he heard it again, the whisper. Faint at first, then growing louder. "You can't escape. You belong to us." The voice was clear now, unmistakable. It came from the corner of his room, a place where the shadows were darker, deeper. He couldn't move. His body was frozen in terror as he watched the shadows shift, like something was moving within them. The temperature in the room dropped, and he could see his breath fogging in front of him. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. It was then that he realized the truth. He had never truly left the school. The curse had followed him, and it would never let him go. The last time Kwame saw the school, it was from a distance, its windows dark, its shape looming against the night sky. He knew he would never return. The nightmares, the whispers, the presence that followed him, these were the consequences of his decision. The abandoned school wasn't just haunted. It was a place that trapped souls, a place that claimed those who dared to enter, and now Kwame was one of them. The villagers had warned him, never sleep near the abandoned school. He should have listened. Now it was too late, and he knew, deep down, that the school would never truly let him go. It would wait. It always waited. Never sleep near the abandoned school, the villagers had warned him, and now Kwame understood why. Thanks for watching till the end. If you like this story, hit like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe to this channel so you never miss amazing stories from us. Comment down below in the comment section and let me know which country or city are you tuning in from. Till then, take care, folks. Bye.